Hi everyone, welcome to this video on protozoan diseases, diseases that are caused by the category of microorganisms called protists. So this video is just me going through a diagram that I've already drawn. I think this one actually in particular, it's really important that you draw this from scratch. As you will see, yeah, some of the meaning is lost when it's pre-drawn. It's actually really helpful because it's a cycle that goes round and round. The way malaria is spread, it's really helpful if you build that up step by step in the students' minds. But the main idea we want to get across here, in particular for malaria, again, all of this sequence of lessons is building up this big idea of pathogens, and that diseases, or many communicable diseases, I should say, are caused by pathogens somehow entering the body. And malaria is a great example of a disease caused by a protist, for one, but it's also a really great example of diseases caused by what's called a vector. So that's an animal that carries the pathogen, and it takes it from human to human or organism to organism. So what I would do is start with over here. So actually, this is diagram number 1 here. Start with an infected mosquito. So this is a mosquito that somehow is carrying the malaria pathogen. I did have a really great question when I taught this earlier this year, which was, well, you know, how is it that mosquito got infected in the first place? Because this is a bit of a cycle. That's a big question that I am not knowledgeable enough to answer, to do with kind of mutations and the formation of new organisms and so on. But anyway, you can say, look, don't worry too much about that, but now that this is an established disease, this is how it spreads. So let's start with a mosquito that has the malaria pathogen and is carrying it. And what happens is they land on a non-infected person, and they inject something to I mean, we often talk about a mosquito bite, but really what they're doing is extracting blood. So they inject a tube into the bloodstream of the uninfected person, and the malaria protist, or the pathogen, is passed into the bloodstream of this person. And you can emphasize here that this infected mosquito is acting as what we call a vector. This is the organism that carries disease from one organism to another. You can then say, as this pathogen spreads around the person's body, the protists form a colony inside the liver, and that causes red blood cells inside the person's body to be infected with the malaria pathogen. So what you end up with now is an infected person, and they've got this malaria pathogen all over their body. So now it's spread a lot, and this is going to start causing them to get sick and so on. But then the really important point that you can stress to students is what happens next, and the reason this is a cycle, and why this, again, hopefully you can see why this is helpful to build this up step by step in students' minds. But what happens next is that a non-infected mosquito can come and land on this person's skin. They can put the tube into the person's bloodstream. They can extract some of that blood with these red blood cells that have been infected with the pathogen, and then you have another infected mosquito. So the cycle starts again, and this is how malaria just keeps going round and round and round and round. One thing that you can talk about, and you can see I've just sketched it here with this. This is a very rudimentary sketch here of a mosquito net. So one way you can prevent malaria is by having a mosquito net that forms a physical barrier to stop the mosquitoes from landing on the person's body in the first place. And you can also talk about the role of insecticides, which discourage the mosquitoes from landing on a person as well. And there is, you could also talk about anti-malarial drugs, but I think it's important to distinguish in students' minds between drugs that treat malaria, after, well, I know malaria drugs are taken preemptively, but this kind of idea of treatment versus prevention. So drugs that can treat a disease after you've been infected versus stopping yourself from getting infected in the first place. And that's a really important idea that will come up later on when they get to GCSE biology. So that is the lesson on malaria. In the next lesson, there'll be a summary of all the diseases we've looked at so far.